We're digesting what appears to be the resolution of Cheeseburgergate. That would be the case with Michigan and the NCAA, not the one we were talking about all last fall. Well, at the beginning of last fall. But this is not the Connor Stalions sign stealing accusation case. This is the one that dates back to 2020 during the pandemic. Jim Harbaugh accused of meeting some players for a cheeseburger plus some other things that were going on at the same time that allegedly violated NCAA recruiting rules. There has been a settlement, and Clayton Safey from the Wolverine joins us. So Michigan, multiple assistant coaches at the time have settled, and Jim Harbaugh has not. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, it seems that way. And obviously the NCAA's release was pretty vague as well. They didn't even name Jim Harbaugh, even though they said the former head coach, so we all know who that is. But like you said, they said, current or former coaches. There were 5 of them that could receive or will receive show causes from the NCAA, and they didn't name them. I think one of them might be Mike McDonald, who's now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. So some of these guys are gone. And Michigan did clarify today as well that there won't be current coaches that will receive game suspension. So we won't see something like we saw a year ago when Sharon Moore, who was the offensive coordinator at the time, served a 1-game suspension as part of a negotiated resolution with the NCAA. No current coaches on Michigan staff will miss games for this. The other, the other punishments basically are 3 years of probation, a fine of an undisclosed amount. Not sure that that's going to really harm Michigan all that much. They said recruiting restrictions, which is pretty vague as well. We know last year they self-imposed 2 weeks of having no recruits on campus for games. It could be something similar there, or just, less time, on the road or whatever it would be, less visit weekends. So again, not too many details by the NCAA, but it feels like pretty much a slap on the wrist, and then wait and see on what exactly happens to Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and we'll see what they actually are, because not all show causes are created equal. Essentially, what show cause means is if you're to hire this coach or to continue to employ this coach, you have to show the committee why you are doing that. But they also tack on a penalty or two. And a lot of times the penalties are related to the violation. So it may be that this coach can't go on the road in April, or this coach can't go on the road in November. And that's a lot of times how they deal with this stuff. And as you mentioned, some of these guys are in the NFL. Jay Harbaugh is an NFL assistant now. Mike McDonald is the Seattle Seahawks head coach. Jim Harbaugh, of course, is the Chargers head coach. And so it doesn't really affect them at all. There was the weird situation with Jim Tressel, where right after he got run out of Ohio State and the NCAA was going to penalize him and suspend him for games, he was going to consult with an NFL team and they were going to make him sit games. Like, that's not going to happen here. For example, Antonio Pierce is also under investigation by the NCAA for stuff that happened at Arizona State. He is the Raiders head coach. Nothing's going to happen to him from the NCAA. So, or at least nothing that'll affect him as the Raiders coach. So nothing that's going to affect Jim Harbaugh or Mike McDonald if you are worried about that, Chargers or Seahawks fans.
Yeah, there was a report. Do you remember this? Like middle of last year?
Oh, yeah.
Even before? I can't even remember because it was so crazy. But I think it was even before the Connor Stalions investigation, where basically it was like, if Jim Harbaugh is going to, and this was from NFL Network, I think, if he's going to go to the NFL, they could do the Jim Tressel thing to him. And it was like, even at the time, it was like, I just don't know about that. I don't know that the NFL cares about the quote unquote rule breaking in a sport of college football, that there really are no rules, at this point. I know you've
right. A lot of the rules that they're trying to enforce no longer exist. Those rules that we're talking about in this particular case, a lot of them were unique to the pandemic. It was a lot of, you can't have people visiting your campus. You can't go visit them off campus, that sort of thing during the pandemic. So this is all a fairly unique situation. And again, it does not affect anything that's going on with the case involving Connor Stalions, the accusations of signal stealing. That case, as far as I know, Clayton, is still ongoing. I talked to somebody who's tangentially involved with that a few weeks ago, and it sounds like it's moving very slowly. And I don't know that there's going to be anything going on with that anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's not a huge surprise given how the NCAA moves, as we know. I think we're like almost 150 days since they opened an investigation on who the hell was on the Central Michigan sideline for the Michigan State game.
Never going to figure it out.
Right. We just don't know who that guy was, wearing CMU gear and Nike shoes with an Adidas logo taped over him or whatever it was. So
I believe they were on shoes. So we got another shoe brand, which may have been a violation of somebody else's shoe deal. Who knows?
Right, but whoever that was,
who can possibly know, because we don't know who that person was.
No, exactly. So, no, it's a good point to make, because it can get a little confusing when you got a couple NCAA investigations going on, but has nothing to do with that. And Andy, you and I were texting earlier in the day when I was asking you a couple questions, because you've obviously covered more of this nationally than we have as local reporters. But then we're talking about the Jim Harbaugh situation, where it won't really affect him, as you said, or Mike McDonald or any of these guys that are no longer in college football. But to me, I've always thought of Jim Harbaugh as a guy who's going to coach pretty much until he dies. He actually has said that.
He's definitely said that.
Yeah, he has said that. And at some point, does he end up back at some college job and, whatever, just for the love of the game? Could it affect him then? Will the NCAA exist by that point is a big question.
I didn't even think about it that way, but you're exactly right. And so Jim Harbaugh is 60. He's starting a job with the Chargers. Now, famously, Jim Harbaugh tends to burn bright and burn out at various places. Now, he stayed at Michigan a lot longer than any other place, but I would argue that he actually had 2 separate tenures at Michigan, and that's probably why.
Yeah, 2 separate tenures. It was his alma mater. People here love him, obviously. I mean, he was a Heisman finalist as a player. He comes back. He was a great coach. So different circumstances here than in San Francisco, for example, where he stayed 4 years, and they pretty much showed him the door after he took him to 3 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. So
how mad do you have to be to do that, by the way?
Exactly. So, and you can argue whatever side you want and who has the facts straight or who doesn't. But the fact is that happened. So to me, and this is just kind of projecting down the road, I just have a theory that he's at some point going to come back to college. I mean, we have Bill Belichick out there who is not employed right now because of the way the NFL's gone. Could Jim Harbaugh coach UCLA, in 8 years or something like that when things are done in LA? Who knows? It doesn't really matter at this point. Again, the NCAA may not exist, but it's just something to think about, because he's pretty much the only one that is still involved with the NCAA at this point. Michigan's reached its resolution. It'll serve its punishment, but Jim Harbaugh is going to, I think, continue to fight. And I guess we haven't maybe noted the exact reason why, is because he's facing a level 1 allegation right now for quote unquote misleading or failing to cooperate with investigators about these rather minor violations. So
right.
We don't know what he said in these meetings with the NCAA, but the fact is, whatever he did or said or didn't say, they took as not cooperating. And, he's a very, stubborn guy, principled guy. And I think that he's probably going to fight this, even though he's not in college football at this point.
Yeah, he's retained Tom Mars, who's an attorney who's worked with a lot of different coaches and players the last few years and become kind of a thorn in the side of the NCAA from the NCAA's release. So, yeah, it does feel like this is a lot being dumped on Harbaugh. The negotiated resolution also involved the school's agreement that the underlying violations determined a head coach responsibility violation, and the former football head coach failed to meet his responsibility to cooperate with the investigation. That is essentially Michigan saying, we stipulate that. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is real thrilled about that. I reached out to Tom Mars, his attorney, who said that Michigan and the NCAA did not talk to either him or Jim Harbaugh about this before this resolution was reached. So my guess is Jim Harbaugh keeps fighting. My guess is he keeps paying Tom Mars billable hours and hopes that Tom Mars remains a thorn in the side of the NCAA. And that could be funny because, again, it can't really hurt Jim Harbaugh. And as you pointed out, he's 60 right now. Let's say at age 66, he's won a Super Bowl and things have gone great. And he decides, okay, Justin Herbert, he's getting old. It's time to go do something else. And he's like, yeah, I like living here. I'm going to coach UCLA. I would imagine you can probably make that work. Like Bruce Pearl was still under a show cause when Auburn hired him to coach their basketball team. He then had them in the Final Four not long after. So it is possible that all of this can be worked out ultimately, but it will be very funny to watch Jim Harbaugh battle the NCAA, whether it's he's actually taking part or his attorney's just throwing the punches, while Jim Harbaugh can't actually be hurt by the NCAA.
Right. It's kind of the perfect storm in that way, because he can actually throw punches now, and they don't really have a way of punching back immediately. And I do think, and you and I have probably talked about this on air, back in the other investigation in the late last season, he kind of enjoys a fight. He kind of enjoys conflict. So, and he certainly has enough money, especially now with a reported $16 million a year or whatever it is from the Chargers.
Yeah, I don't know what Tom's charging, but he could probably raise it.
Exactly. So it'll just be something to follow. But again, in terms of Michigan and the impact, short term, long term on the Wolverines, shouldn't be too big of a deal as they enter this new era. And you understand it from Michigan too, trying to cover itself and set Sharon more up, early on in his career here, to not have to worry about this stuff as they move forward.
All right. So except for Jim Harbaugh, who probably will enjoy the fight, Cheeseburgergate has been laid to rest.
It's kind of
now
sad.
Bring on Connor Stallion's gate, or whatever whatever word you would like me to attach gate to, because people robbed the Watergate Hotel and not a Chick-fil-A. That's why. Thank you so much for watching. Clayton, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.